in Cadiz, Kentucky. The interviewer was Bart Frito, and also present in the room is Mark Tanaka Sanders of the National Park Service. Okay, now we got that out of the way. Let me start off by asking you what your name is and what your hometown was back in '41.
Vance Leneve, Golden Pond, Kentucky.
What branch of the service were you in, and what was your rank?
Navy, and I was metalsmith second class.
When did you come to Hawaii?
1940, June of 1940.
And where were you assigned?
Well, I was aboard the ship at that time.
And the name of the ship?
Medusa, SS Medusa.
What kind of a ship was that?
The repair ship.
Let me take you to the morning of the attack. Before the attack, that morning, what were you doing?
You was sleeping. Well, actually, I was awake, but we were still in our cots. We slept in our shop. It was a pipe and copper shop, about one deck above the main deck, and we were all sleeping in, which we normally did on Sunday. And one of the boys heard the planes and stepped out on deck and recognized the planes as Japanese, and of course we automatically started going to our battle stations. And
had you heard anything at this point besides the planes?
Hadn't heard
no bombs dropping?
Not a thing.
What happened then? You went up above deck, on deck.
Well, we grabbed our clothing and headed for our battle station, and in my case it was down in the foundry, which was down in a hole.
Below deck?
Below decks, about, I guess, 4 decks below where we were. And
did you go there?
I went there, and then they asked for volunteers to go to the powder magazine, and I thought anything was better than being in that hole
4 decks
in the foundry, 4 decks down. Forgot about the fact that the powder magazine was the most dangerous spot on the ship.
Before you went to your battle station, you were on the deck. What did you see?
I didn't actually take time to look for anything at that time. But
did you see any attacking airplanes at that time?
I didn't, because we just headed out as fast as we could down below decks.
So you went to your battle station, but then volunteered to go to the powder room? Or
right.
Powder magazine, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
What happened next?
Well, we were loading clips for 30 caliber machine guns, and I was taking the clips to the top deck, and that's the only way I got to see any action at all and see any planes. And I would kill a little time while I was up there, look around and see what was going on.
What did you see going on?
Well, just saw planes coming in and the bombs dropping, and of course everybody, all the ships by that time, within a few minutes, were getting some guns in action, you know. Of course, I didn't spend a lot of time up there. I was running back and forth, you know.
Did you see any bombs or torpedoes hit?
No, I didn't.
What were the crew members on the Medusa doing on deck, the gunners? They were firing what kind of weapons at the planes?
They even broke out the Browning automatic rifles, and some of them were on deck trying to use those. I don't think they had much much luck with something like that, but anyway, they were making an effort.
Did you see any of the attacking airplanes get hit?
No, I didn't.
These planes, I take it, were rather low.
Yes.
Were you able to see any of the pilots aboard these planes?
No, I didn't see any of the. Didn't really take that much time to look, you know.
So during the heat of battle, you were shuttling back and forth between the powder magazine and the decks carrying ammo.
Right.
What happened next? What happened after that?
Well, of course, we heard a loudspeaker from the Curtis. It was a seaplane tender, and they were tied up to a buoy just a short distance from us. Told us there was a 2-man sub between us, and we tried to get the gun crew. I found out later the powder hoist broke down on their 5-inch gun, surface gun, and they turned a 3-inch anti-aircraft gun down between the two ships and put a hole in his conning tower.
Between the Medusa and the Curtis.
And the Curtis. And then they signaled a destroyer. I don't remember. I believe it was the Shaw. I'm not sure.
Monahan? Does that ring a bell?
It could have been Monahan. I'm not sure. But they came over and picked him up and dropped a depth charge on him.
I'm sorry, when you say picked him up, meaning sighted him?
Right. Mm.
Did you see this destroyer ram this?
No, I didn't.
Apparently it did, but you did not. You didn't see it. So at one point you must have stopped shuttling ammo up to the deck. What happened next?
Well, I don't remember that there was much going on except that, it was just
When you were up on deck, when you bring the ammo up, did you have occasion to look around the harbor to see what it looked like?
I really didn't notice, of course. I saw smoke and all of that, but in a situation like that, maybe you don't see what you would like to have seen later on. If you think about it, I wish I'd have watched the whole action and could have seen the bombs hit the ships, but you don't take time to do that.
Was there a lot of confusion?
Well, not really. On our ship, I don't think there was. Everybody went to their battle station and started doing what you would ordinarily do. I didn't see a lot of confusion at all. But of course, on other people's ships, I'm not sure about it.
What was going through your mind while all of this was happening? You're doing your job.
Well, the first thing went through my mind when I was down in that hole was, how in the world am I going to get out of here if we take a bomb? Because a ship like that, one bomb would have put us to the bottom. The Vestal was another repair ship, and it did take a bomb and went down.
That was right next to the Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going through your mind.
And I thought, well, now maybe this cupola, a cupola is in a foundry. They use a cupola for the smoke, the fire to go out when they're melting metal. And it's like a tall chimney, about 3 feet in diameter. And I thought, well, maybe we can get out that way, And I was kind of glad when they said, come up to the powder magazine and help us load clips.
How long did you stay on the Medusa that day? Did you stay on it all day?
Oh, yes, we didn't leave it.
What's the most vivid memory you have of the attack?
The most vivid memory is this boy going on deck and recognizing those planes and yelling. He said a couple of curse words, and he says it's the Japs. And that's the first thing that I think of when I think of the attack. I don't know how he recognized it, because a lot of people said they saw the planes coming over, yet they didn't recognize those planes as Japanese, and he did immediately.
When you looked up, did you recognize them?
Well, I don't think I would have, really.
What happened to the rest of the day for you?
Well, we stayed at battle stations, and of course there was a lull from the first wave to the second. And we stayed at battle stations for, I guess, until about dusk, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure about that. And then it was just getting dark, and some of our planes came over, and I think every ship in the harbor opened up on them and shot down 2.
Did you see that?
Planes.
Did you see that?
And the only thing I saw was the gunfire. I didn't see the planes.
Can you think of any incident that happened during the course of the battle that you might share with us? Any interesting little...
Not really.
What was it like here in the days and weeks after the attack? What did you do?
Well, we worked. We were a repair ship. We didn't take damage. We had a little machine gun, few holes, and a little shrapnel. I had one man get a shrapnel in his arm. But we started right in on a 7-day week, and most of us worked 12 hours a day in the repair division doing repair work. We had part of our workforce helped cut the hole in the bottom of the Oklahoma. And
You were on that workforce?
no, I didn't work on that job. But they got out several men and brought them aboard our ship. And most of them stayed and were part of our crew from then on. And one of them was a ship fitter, and he worked with a diving crew out of my shop. I wasn't on the diving force, but the crew, but they worked mostly aboard the Oklahoma. But we did repair jobs for a lot of ships.
When did you realize the magnitude of what had happened that morning?
Well, I suppose by the time it was over, everybody, of course, we had radios. The radio was telling you everything that was going on, and of course, we listened to all that, and you have really, I guess we knew about as much as anybody else through the news media, not from what we knew aboard the ship. You know, they didn't tell us a lot what had happened.
Did you have an opportunity at some point to see some of the extensive damage along
yes,
Battleship Row?
Yes.
When did you see that?
Well, every day. Of course, we were in and out and around over at the shipyard, and I remember the oil, that was a very clean harbor. We had no mosquitoes, as I remembered, from 1940 until that day. And of course, the oil that came out of all the ships that were sunk just covered the harbor, and the oil was probably 6 inches deep. I know they, maybe deeper than that. They brought some kind of yard craft from the coast that picked the oil up out of the water and helped clean it. And I remember our boat crews were picking bodies out of the water, and I didn't work on any of those boat crews, but they would come back and tell us the conditions and how the oil was all over, you know, and then from that time on, we had to sleep under mosquito netting, sleeping up above deck, you know, where the mosquitoes could get to you. We had to put mosquito nettings on our cots, or they were so bad you couldn't sleep.
Yeah, okay.
Have these on. I want them. Okay.
What was your reaction when you saw the devastation along Battleship Row?
Well, I don't know. I suppose you had a lot of thoughts, but mainly everybody was mad, of course, naturally. The people who are some of our best friends today were our worst enemies then, and there was a lot of anger in everybody at that time. And
I take it that anger then has dissipated over the years.
Sure.
Some people still hold animosity towards Japan or the Japanese because of the attack. How about you?
Well, I don't really think I ever did that much, because if you think about it, those fellows were doing what their government told them to do, which is what we would have done if they'd have told us to do something that wasn't right. Naturally, we thought they were wrong, and they thought they were right, I guess. But after it was all over, and right away we could tell that we were not going to be enemies of the Japanese. And as far as personal animosity, I've never had that feeling.
So, for example, if there were some Japanese survivors of World War II or the Pearl Harbor attack at this year's reunion or even another year's reunion,
we had that happen in San Antonio at a meeting, a national meeting. We had a pilot from who actually took part in the attack, and a lot of people got his autograph, and he had a little pickup truck sitting there and had signs up, and in fact I think he asked if he could join our organization. Of course they turned him down, but
how did you feel about him?
It didn't bother me. In fact, I wish I could have talked to him, and I went by and spoke to him, but I didn't get a chance to talk to him.
How long after the attack was it before you left the islands?
We went to South Pacific in May, I believe it was, of 43.
Aboard the Medusa?
Aboard the Medusa, and then I left it down there in June.
And where did you go?
I went back to the States and picked up a new ship, a destroyer escort.
And finished out the war on that ship?
Mm-hmm. Stayed on the East Coast a while and then came back to the South Pacific.
What was life like for you while you were in Hawaii after the attack as far as martial law was concerned?
Well, the only thing that worried us, we couldn't get a bottle of beer, and finally they opened up for 4.5 months, I believe, there wasn't a bar open. And I wasn't all that much of a drinker, but I did enjoy a beer, especially if I'd been working hard and hot. And finally we could go to the Marine barracks there on the base, and then I think it was about 4.5 months. But when they had the martial law, one thing I noticed, when you would go down the street, anybody, a serviceman or a civilian, if you didn't stop when the flag was being lowered or raised at a school or anything, they would place you under arrest right there. So actually they meant business, And of course it kind of messed up our swimming on Waikiki. They put all that barbed wire out there, that made a little change.
Did you, do you know how martial law affected the civilian population?
I really don't know how they felt about it. I didn't know that many personally, and I suppose they seemed to be in favor of anything that would keep down an invasion, and they were afraid. Of course, they did have spies. The Japanese had spies here, and I expect about 99% of them were as loyal to the United States as anybody else, but there was a few, in fact, they caught a few, I think.
When you hear or read the words Pearl Harbor, December 7th, what picture flashes in your mind?
Well, just the attack, naturally. I'm like everybody else. You can always pinpoint the exact spot. People my age, all of them can pinpoint the exact spot they were at, even the place they were standing when they heard the news and how, and I suppose the memory is about the same, except that mine would be different, being.
One picture more vivid than any other, though, in your mind? When I say to you Pearl Harbor?
Not really. No particular incident except when it just all of a sudden it was on us, and we realized that what we were in for at that time. And
you played a part in a major event in history.
Right.
Has that affected your life in any way?
Well, sure, it has, because being a survivor, and at the time there was, as I told you before, there was 8 people from my hometown here, but now I'm the only one in the county, and
the others have died or moved away?
Well, most of them have moved away. I think there's one that has died. And of course, joining this organization, the Pearl Harbor Survivor Association, come in contact with these fellows. We tell the same stories and rehash it, back and forth. Met a lot of good people and use it a lot of times for an excuse to take a vacation trip. Every 5 years, come back to Hawaii. I've been back 3 times, so.
How do you feel about talking about it?
Oh, it doesn't bother me to talk about it. I have no real bad memories as far as the actual attack took place. It's when you think about the people who died, of course, it's bad, but I try not to dwell on that.
So?
Stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My name is Walter Gaddis. I joined the Army at Fort Bragg, North Carolina in 1940 and was sent to Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. I was a clerk at the old division and post headquarters at Schofield on the morning of December the 7th. At that time, on Sunday, we were able to get our eggs fried the way we wanted them. I went into the kitchen about 7:40, as I remembered it, and asked for 2 eggs over well. And the cook dropped the eggs on the griddle, and a big explosion hit. The pots and pans over the table rattled, and I thought General Short was having bombs dropped on a range beyond Wheeler Field, which was about a half a mile away from our barracks. But I thought the bombs were dropping beyond Wheeler Field. And the cook turned the eggs over, gave them to me, another bomb hit. And the cook got excited and cussed a little bit and said, they're going to wake up everybody here at the last minute for breakfast. They're going to run in here at 8 o'clock. And he always locked the door at 8. You got your breakfast before here. I didn't get it. So he gave me my eggs. I walked out into the mess hall, looked out the back window, which overlooked the top of the hangar at Wheeler Field. And I saw a plane, a single-motored, what looked like a fighter plane, coming over the hangars, and something dropped out, and then the hangar roof went up in pieces, and a second or two later, whatever it was, the concussion sound hit. And my first thought was that surely General Short wouldn't destroy a hangar just to get annual maneuvers going. But by that time, there was lots of activity. We rushed around, and we passed out our rifles. I went back to my bunk and got my full field packed and reported to my duty station, which was an 18-inch carriage Underwood typewriter in headquarters, and stood by my typewriter at my duty station, waiting for the next order. So that's really my story of the first few minutes of Pearl Harbor. After that, see, I was in the island. I was in Hawaii 6 months before the attack. I mean, a year and a half before the attack, and 6 months after. 6 months later, I came back to the States and was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, and became an infantry platoon leader, a lieutenant. And from there, I went to Europe, came back, left school. I was separated from the Army in 1945, went back to school on the GI Bill, and spent most of my life either studying, practicing, or teaching government. I taught at Center College. I worked in state government a good many years here and elsewhere. I retired about 9 years ago from a job in state government in Franklin.
Now, howdy. Clarence Gunther, Franklin, Kentucky. Went into the Navy in March 1940. Took my training at Great Lakes. From there, I went to San Diego and caught USS Monaghan, and they shipped me to Honolulu, which I was there about 20 months before the Japanese decided to bomb Pearl Harbor. Kind of a gray on Sunday morning for the very simple reason that breakfast was over with and I'd done spent 15 cents for a Sunday paper. Laid down in the bunk to read the paper, and to this day I have never read it. And when you're not making but $54 a month, 15 cents is 15 cents. So therefore, that's one reason why I have no love for the Japanese, although I ride around with a fella that drives one of them all the time. He drives a Japanese automobile, but still. About somewhere in the neighborhood of between 7:45 to 8:15, there was 4 destroyers tied up at a nest to a buoy. The USS Farragut, USS Dale, Monaghan, and I can't think of the name of the other ship. But the Japanese come over and they dropped the bomb and hit a buoy that was right next to this nest of ships that we were tied up to. A piece of shrapnel took part of my kneecap off. So getting down off from the 5-inch 38, of which I was a partner on, we decided that better go get this little leg bandaged up. So while I was getting off, a fighter plane come along and started strafing the ship, and I caught a bullet right through the left leg of the same one that hurt before. I thought to myself, now, here's this war been going on about 30 minutes, and if I'm going to get shot up this much, if this war lasts too long, I'm not long for this world. But anyhow, we survived it, got underway, we went out, and we stayed on patrol trying to find out where the aircraft came from. But to this day, we never found it. We did find out that the radar systems at Diamond Head and Barber's Point was not manned for some reason. All the ships in the harbor were just about ready for admiral's inspection with ammunition and everything struck below. By the time we got all this stuff out and got ready to fight, the Japanese figured the war was over. And that's just about all I've got to say, except I retired from national distillery about 8 years ago, and I've enjoyed sitting around doing that. Thank you.
In the Navy, October 1st, 1941. And my name is Charles J. Brewer, and from there I went to Great Lakes, Illinois, to be trained for the Navy and everything else. Then I come home for a week and went back to Great Lakes. And from there they sent me back over to Pearl Harbor to learn my restaurant training. And as I was doing, learning my training and all that, the day after, December 7th, 41, I was on guard duty at the time. I just got relieved, and I went down below deck to listen to the radio as the rest of the fellows who was up. as we listened to the radio, I'm drinking coffee too. All of a sudden, a bomb hit on the starboard side of the ship, and I told one of the fellows, I said, most likely the Army didn't put their bomb in the bomb rack right. And then all of a sudden, over the loudspeaker, before that happened, the chaplain broke on the loudspeaker stating that he would have the mass pack ag for us at 9 o'clock for all people aboard the ship who wanted to go to the mass. Then all of a sudden, general quarters sounded, and we all headed for our guns. Boy, I mean, we sure went. We were the first ship in Pearl Harbor to open fire on the Japanese at the time it happened. And boy, we threw everything in it too. And, well, that's about all. B-38. They also thought at the time we were sunk at Pearl Harbor at the same time as Arizona, but they found out. They used to call us a ghost ship through all the Pacific water.
My name is Earl Lowe. I was born in Pike County, Kentucky. Signed up in the Army in 1939, Northern Virginia. I signed up for Hawaiian Islands and got sent to Schofield Barracks. On the weekend, they give us a 3-day pass. Me and my buddy, we went drinking beer on Friday, Saturday, and Saturday night we checked into the YMCA across from the Black Cat Cafe, where you catch a bus going to Schofield Barracks. And when they dropped the first bomb, we run over and got on the bus and got to Pearl Harbor. The MPs and SP had to stop. And we sat there, it seemed like this for 2 hours, and we sat there and watched. There was 55 of us on a little old bus held 30. And we had a ringside seat. And we saw all of it. It seemed like we was there for 2 hours. Since I got out of the Army, I got out of the Army in 1945. I spent all my time at Schofield Barracks. Got out in 45, and I came and worked at different jobs, and ended up working with General Electric, and retired from General Electric, and stayed in Louisville, Kentucky.
Name is Herman Horn, Frankfort, Kentucky. Was inducted into the Army under the old Solstice Order. Select Service Act, June 11, 1941. Went to California for recruit training. There, September 26th, went to the island of Oahu. Day of the attack, been on pass the night before, got up breakfast, called, got me a bottle of milk and an apple, put under my bunk, went back to bed. And it all turned loose. The plane, the first thing, we had regular Army cadres. We were all selective service. They got us out and lined us up in 2 rows from the tents. We, some of the people, the boys, were picking up hot pieces of shrapnel, bullets, and things were falling. We only had 2 men wounded. Both of them through the thigh. After they lined us up, gave us 35 rounds of ammunition each, 30 caliber, and told us not to use it. Then they put us on a bunch of trucks and shipped us away from the harbor and went to King Barracks, up on the other end of the island. But up there we had 4 1917 model 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, rangefinder and height finder, no radar. We hauled ammunition all day. We found out about 2 weeks later we had the wrong ammunition. It wouldn't even work. But the first night of December the 7th, these regular Army cavalry sergeants come by and put me on the 30 caliber water-cooled machine gun. I'd never seen one before. So he showed us how to load it. He said, stick the clip in, pull it twice, it's ready to fire. So that night they hollered, paratroopers landing on Barber's Point, load your pieces. So I loaded it. The next morning he came by and he said, you didn't even have to load it. So we wasn't very well prepared for war. But in this convoy, when we were leaving Fort Weaver, every time the Japs dropped their bombs on the harbor, they'd come over to strafe us and we would hit the cane fields. And since I was discharged the night off, we left the islands and went to Saipan as occupational forces. And then we left Saipan and went to Iwo after it was secured for as occupation. And on Iwo, we never did get our guns off down the beach. When Dick and I left there, they were still there on the beach. Since being retired in 1945, June 45, I worked for Shinley Distillers and retired about 6.5 years ago. That's it.
My name is Vernon Hiles, and I was drafted in June of 1941. We went to Camp Callan and for boot camp for 13 weeks, and then after 13 weeks, we found ourselves over at Pearl Harbor. Well, that was the 26th of September, 41, and we went to Fort Camp. Later, they split us all up, and we went to Fort Weaver. And we were at Fort Weaver December the 7th, sitting right on the end of the harbor. And we had no ammunition, no guns, no nothing. So they sent us up the road to Fort Brett, where we had 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, and no ammunition for those. And we had 2 boys wounded, but that was all. And after a bunch of noise for quite a while, everything calmed down, so we just sit there. And that's about for I don't know how long. And then we finally went to Saipan for a few months, and Iwo Jima for 13 days, I believe it was. And then we came on, they come on back. And it took me 47 months to get home one time. And then I finally got discharged, and I went back into the roofing business with my brother and my dad. And I retired from there just a couple years ago. And that's it.
My name is William Eversole. I joined the Navy in Frankfort, Kentucky, 1941, April. I took my boot camp at Great Lakes. Put the ship in commission in New York in 1941. And we went across the canal and on the Pacific, arriving in Pearl Harbor along about November. I was there about a month when the Japs attacked. I got up at Reveille, had breakfast, a cornbread, and Boston baked beans. I went to my quarters. The general quarters were sounded. I went to my station, which was to flood the ammunition depot. Ammunition box. I didn't stay there long, so they had me up on decks, passing out hard hats and ammunition. I was a little bit apprehensive, but I wasn't too scared at the time. But the Japs sure blown the heck out of the battleships, and sure was loud. It was so loud I could not turn the ammunition down on my shoulder, look around to see if it went off. Uneasy, but the time passed, and later at night I got scared to heck when I first seen the tracer bullets. I went on out in the Pacific after that in June, and stayed out there till 1944, I think. And then I come back and discharged in 1946. Nor did the submarine stop.
I'm Lee Ebner, and I went aboard the USS West Virginia in Seattle, and about a Oh, that, no, that. Jim, is it going? Can you stop?
Just go ahead.
Anyway, I went aboard the USS West Virginia in Seattle, and then we came on down several months later to San Francisco, and then from there we went to Pearl Harbor, and then about several months later, then that was when Pearl Harbor was, and that morning I was up on the signal bridge, and there was a couple of planes came over, and they came right across our bow, and I thought they were Army planes, and then I saw that big red circle, and then I didn't realize that they had dropped torpedoes, and then there was looked over in Fort Island, there was two planes bombed the runway over at Fort Island naval base, and then about that time we took, realized later, we took about 6 torpedoes, and took 2 bomb hits, and then found out later that we lost our captain and about 105 men, and there was several of us up on the bridge, and we got into a conning tower to machine gunning, and got in this conning tower and stayed in there a few minutes until a lull came, and we came outside, and we got off the bridge, and then went down, and between one of the raids, while we were about that time, our deck was awash with water, and so then we started going down below deck and get some of our shipmates, and then brought them up topside, and they were just several of them were covered with oil, and then there was some of the motor launches coming alongside, and then we put those men into the motor launches, and then so finally we got in one of the motor launches and left the ship and went over to the sub base, and then later we assembled and with the West Virginia group over there trying to regroup everybody and find out who was still survived, and then later that evening we went back aboard the West Virginia, and then went back and over and stood watch on the USS Tennessee that night. And Tennessee was inboard alongside Fort Island, and I'd say the West Virginia took probably more torpedoes and bombs, I imagine, than any other ship. We took an average about 6 torpedoes. Okay. I was, I had a year to go after the war was over, and I was in the Philippines aboard the USS Dixie, and so then I was transferred back to the States, and then I was reassigned to go to the atomic bomb test down at Bikini, and I was there, and then I was discharged from Long Beach, California, and then I came back to Louisville, and then I went to took advantage of my GI Bill of Rights, and I went to the Art Center in Louisville, and then I went to Chicago Academy of Fine Arts for 2 years, and then came back to Louisville, and I worked for B.F. Goodrich for 2 years, and then I joined the Curry Journal, and I was with them for 32 years, retired.
I'm Ellisville O'Neill of Carrollton, Kentucky. I had enlisted in the Marine Corps January the 5th, 1941. After boot camp, I went to AME school in Jacksonville, Florida, from there to the West Coast. And after about 2 weeks there, I boarded the USS Wharton for Hawaii. Also aboard this USS Wharton were several construction workers going to Wake Island. At Pearl, we disembarked at Pearl Harbor, went to the Eva Marine Air Corps Station, which formerly had been the Barber's Point mooring mast, the Navy out there. Eva was a Marine Corps aviation base who had been opened at the beginning of 1941. Had a fighter squadron, a bomber squadron there, and utility squadrons, as well as a surf squadron administration. Upon arriving there, I was assigned to a headquarters service squadron and put immediately on mess duty for 1 month. I arrived in there the first part of October and had been there a little over, if you can figure, over a little 2 months at the time that the Japanese arrived on December the 7th. On December the 7th, I was on the duty section. 1/4 of the men, 25%, were required to stay on the base for duty over the weekend. My particular duty at this time consisted, of course everyone laughed when I tell them, but it is the truth. My duty that morning, at the exact time they packed, was watering plants and flowers and shrubbery around the administration building. Something like Ferdinand the Bull, I guess. Myself and another man named Rao, who has an article, for those in Pearl Harbor might be interested in this, in the article, the last issue of the Graham. He and I both had the same duty at this time and were close together. And we noticed the planes, Japanese planes coming over. Several, we don't know the exact number in confusion, but there are some zeros, some betties, and vowels, which mostly was damage was done from the dive bombing attack, not dive bombing, low level attack and bombing and strafing with incendiary bullets. When we first saw the planes, of course, with the red balls on the side, we naturally assumed they was probably the Red forces from the Army and Navy who just proved the Army had completed maneuvers. But we just completed also the day before, and all our planes, as in military fashion, was lined up along the edge of the runway in perfect rows. And also, in addition to this, Argus had the previous day, once they completed, knew had to pull the guns out. So our planes were sitting in the runway in perfect position, lined up in rows, no guns in them at all. Of course, there's been some discussion of what could have happened if our planes got in the air. Of course, if they got in the air, there weren't nothing they could do. Of course, that seems the Japs made one pass over the field just as if they were sizing up the situation. Now, low enough that you could, if you knew anyone in the cockpit, you could recognize the pilot and the rear gunner both. But after making the first run over the field, the next time they came back straight, picking up each row of planes that were sitting there, we had probably 42 planes on the field, lined up in the fashion I mentioned, and they just proceeded to go down row by row and pick them off, you know. Of course, the planes were gassed and incendiary bullets, you can see immediately what happened. Of course, even the first type of plane that was hit was the old seaplane type there, was used most of the train for it, wasn't even flying. That's the first plane that was hit, and at this time, someone remarked, well, I guess someone figured to work for fight that plane to show us what could happen here if we weren't on our toes. This plane
eventually burned up, and also all the other, of course, once they caught on fire, gasoline, there was no way at all to save them in the confusion and all. Of course, then the only way we had to defend ourselves was go to the barracks and get a rifle. Of course, at that time they issued, we had the '03 rifles, each one of the Marine was issued that. It was his constant companion, he kept that, doing his tour of duty almost. Of course, he had the rifle, the bayonet, but they didn't issue any ammunition. The only ammunition that was available that wasn't locked up in the ammunition dump were what the guards had in the guardhouse for guard duty. Well, then after once we got our rifle and ammunition, someone came out the order to get out there and fix your bayonets. Of course, you imagine the confusion of what the order was. The bayonet, the purpose of it was someone had presumed maybe they tried to land there, which, of course, everyone knows that it never happened. Well, we had to go across the field that was under attack at the same time to get the ammunition dump. We break out the ammunition. It just happened that exact time, tomorrow, we got our bread from Pearl City. We didn't have a bakery there. The truck made a run in every morning to pick up bread, and then here comes the bread truck in. So about a dozen of us jumped in the bread truck. We had to ride it across the runway while they were scraping the ammunition dump to get the ammunition that we was going to use in our '03s. Well, when we got over, we found out all the ammunition was locked up, and one particular man who was later killed that day by under orders of the officers because he had been under investigation for being a German spy, and he had the keys and wouldn't surrender. So to facilitate matters in a speedy manner, he was shot and opened up the ammunition dump and got ammunition. Of course, during the rest of the time they fired that the plane was low enough. If you'd been a good enough shot and hunter, of course, you could have possibly hit one, but the chances was very remote that you would do any damage unless you happened to hit the pilot or the gunner. And there were, by some freak, I guess, but more than anything else, there were two planes the Japanese was shot down there. Or, of course, we don't know. So maybe they were damaged someplace else, but anyway, they went down off Eva Beach there. And two men was able to get a machine gun going, that freestanding machine gun used in the back of the SBD. They broke this out and mounted it on the ground in an SBD and was firing standing on the ground with its free 30 caliber or 50 caliber machine gun. And of course, one of these men was severely wounded. There was 5 men that supposedly were killed or died from wounds on the attack there, and 18 was wounded. Of course, they made no specific effort to injure a man. They particularly seemed like they only wanted the planes. I mean, that was their primary objective. Their mission was to destroy the planes, because and they did you might say, a 100% successful job on it. Of course, according to their timetable, they were supposed to attack our base, wheel where the planes were, about 3 to 5 minutes before they attacked Pearl Harbor to keep our planes getting in there to retaliate. Of course, so if they know that if we got there, it wouldn't have been no use anyway. But I mentioned they wouldn't have an ammunition plane, they weren't ready to fly. Of course, I doubt this timetable don't seem to me it holds up, because in reading what happened at Pearl Harbor, Wheeler and every place else, we all know it. The flag was flown up at exactly the same time, regardless of what base it's on. And we were in the process of raising the flags, which also every other base was, every ship was. So this would indicate that almost to me, every place was attacked simultaneously, with the same time frame. Of course, once they set everything on fire, planes through incendiary bullets and small bombs. I've even read one account in the ground where they used napalm bombs, but
this is something completely new to me. Of course, sometimes history gets started, but I was the opinion that no napalm bomb was dropped there at all. And of course, napalm bomb, as a rule, is used against personnel rather than destroy planes. So I believe this is just a trick that's been played on somebody in the passage of time. Immediately after all the planes were burning, they seemed to complete their job, they left. And maybe it was gone for 45 minutes. And then they returned again. It seemed like the next time they returned, they more or less to maybe to admire what they had done before. At this time, they did strafe up down, of course, in the officers' country where the tent was lined up where they lived. They made several passes up and down through officers' barracks and strafed some through there, but there's only one officer hit with machine gun bullet in the butt. I mean, a minor wound, the Colonel Haynes. That's the only one that was hit in just a strafing effort through the once returned after the initial attack. Immediately after this, we could see running our side, we could see the heavy smoke from Pearl Harbor, not knowing really what happened there or the extent of what happened. Of course, we satisfied the Japanese we weren't important enough to be an isolated case where they attacked us, and soon the word came in that it was an island-wide attack, all military installation base. Harbor hadn't been attacked, but luckily at our place, it's a little bit different being in aviation, I always thought, and being on the ground. It didn't be on aboard ship and being attacked and sunk. I mean, of course, they can burn your plane if you got to be on the ground. You're in a different situation if the ship is sinking and burning with you on it. So I always was very thankful I was in an aviation unit. I mean, it's completely different from what you might go through if it's in the Navy or where your ship was sunk and have to fight the fire and water and everything at the boys who was lost in Pearl Harbor and also those who were saved. I never had any desire to be a part of a naval battle at sea, which luckily I never did. Once the battle was over at Pearl Harbor, we got word General Rowell, who was commander of the 1st Marine Air Wing, got word from him, and he was, well, I can't say pleased, but he wasn't unhappy that we'd lost the planes we had, because the planes we had was obsolete. And at that time, if you remember, all the war effort was going to helping through the Lend-Lease program, sending everything to Russia and abroad, and we weren't getting anything new at all. So the only way it seemed that we were going to get the planes we needed to finish the war, the successful conclusion, was to get rid of the one we had, and this was the only way it seemed that we were going to get rid of them. So General Rowell did remark that the house is not on fire yet, but we'll be getting replaced with planes, and they might have done us a favor and themselves a disservice by destroying the one we had. And I guess maybe it turned out this way because once we were replenished with planes and of the more compatible type that was able to cope with the Jap Zero and the planes they had in combat, or I think our pilot in the same plane was superior to most of their pilots. Of course, the pilots that they brought into Pearl Harbor were experienced pilots who'd been probably through China and other places. They weren't flying their first mission by any means. Well, after Pearl Harbor, of course, squadron was regrouped, formed new planes, went to East Body and the New Hebrides and established a base there, eventually through the Solomon Island Guadalcanal. Then I returned to the state for a couple of years of stateside duty, went
and then went overseas again back to Eva again, then the Midway. I mean, of course, that was only the train this was past, the Battle of Midway. And then eventually Aishima off Okinawa, and then to Okinawa. Of course, unfortunately, the war ended where I was in December the 7th. It ended where I was in September at Okinawa. If you remember, the PC was signed aboard the U.S. Missouri just off the harbor, Aishima and Okinawa. And of course, I extended 2 years, stayed in service from 1947. 1947, they had a plan where you could take a discharge and decide whether you wanted to stay in or not. And of course, I didn't was debating whether to stay in or not, so I did stay in the reserves. I came home and met my wife Julia, and it's been a year we was married and have been ever since, and had 3 children who we're very proud of. And I called back from active duty during the Korean War when they opened the 3rd Marine Air Wing at Ocala, Florida, but I never seen no overseas duty during the Korean War, only training operation at Ocala. Since then, since before 53 after the Korean War, when we returned with discharge there, I requested a complete discharge from the Marine Corps. Was granted as such. Since then, Julia and Steph had lived in Carroll, Kentucky, at St. in Carroll County.
Ready? World War II started for me in 1939. My name is Jim Gander. I joined the service October 25th, 1930. And everything was real good in the service. And then 39 come along and everything changed. Maneuvers, one right after the other. And then my time ran out. My hitch was up in October 1941. And they gave us all a little party, and I thought I was a civilian. All my clothes, all my belongings was on the ship, and I went to San Francisco. And there I was, I thought I was a civilian. I told the first sergeant he couldn't tell me what to do because I was a civilian. But I knew it, he knew it, that I was still in the Army. So, let me tell you about Schofield Barracks. Schofield Barracks had about 4 regiments. And all the regiment was built like a fort. And when the quadrangle I was in, they had the 8th field and 11th field. And there was 2 ways in. Come through the Selly Port or come through the roadway, which had 2 outlets. And Oahu, the home of Pearl Harbor, and Honolulu is 85 miles around. Schofield Barracks was 17 miles from Honolulu. On December the 7th, me and 2 other friends, we were on maneuvers, and we took off on a Saturday night, went into Honolulu, and we ended up at the YMCA. About 6:30 I got up and went to the Black Cat Cafe, and all of a sudden we heard a bunch of loud noise like dynamite going off. And somebody come running in the Black Cat Cafe and said, the Chinamen are bombing Pearl Harbor. And nobody moved, they just sat there and finished their breakfast. Then, over the loudspeaker, they said, everyone report to your battle station. And I was in the Army. I said, what in the hell is a battle station? So, finally then, planes started flying over the YMCA and the Black Hat Cafe, and I went out in the street, and there was a bus and people trying to get on it, and two of my friends, they come running out of the Y, and we got on the bus and we went about 2 blocks, and a two-engine bombers coming right down the Kamehameha Highway right at us. Well, the bus driver was a Chinaman. He stopped the bus and he jumped out, and I was about the 3rd or the 4th one to jump out. And those 50 caliber bullets, they were hitting that Kamehameha Highway, and the concrete was flying all over. So we started out on the run. We got to Wheeler Field, and that was all black, smoky. And we were in the sugarcane field. Over in Wahoo, they have sugarcane and pineapple. The sugarcane is in the lowland, and the pineapple in the highland. It takes 18 months to grow pineapple. Well, then we started out. We got as far as Pearl Harbor. We laid right across from Pearl Harbor, and those bombers were coming in. They just barely cleared the wires. You could see the pilot, and someone says they're taking pictures. Well, then they would go all across from Pearl Harbor and turn around and come back and go over again. I guess they already dumped all the bombs they had. But they kept coming back and forth, so I guess probably they were taking pictures. Well, then we got out the cane field. We kept going. We got to Pearl City. Pearl City is the backyard of Pearl Harbor. And we got to Pearl City, and then we started going up the mountain to Schofield. We got to Schofield. Wheeler Field was at the main gate, and that hangar was all smoke. But Wheeler Field had no planes. All their planes were down Bell Field. They had a maneuver for 2 weeks, and they left their planes down there because they were going back Monday morning. Well, about 4 or 5 of them jumped into an old beat-up Ford touring car with no top on it. And they come out of that coast like gangbusters. There was 4 of them, and I read in the paper later that all 4 of them were shot down. Those zeros were really something. Well, then we got to the 19th Infantry and went across the quadrangle, and that was all clean, there was nobody there. We got to the 35th Infantry quadrangle, and there was 3 soldiers. They had shoulder hats over them. They would have been shot. And the sergeant told me, he says they were out in the middle of the quadrangle pointing up the sky, and he says that's what happened. He says everybody's hollering at them to get out of there, and they just stood in the middle of the quadrangle and pointing up at the sky, the planes. And at that time, everybody thought it was Chinese, and they didn't think it was the rising sun. They thought it was a moon. And I didn't know what it was. Some of them said it was a Russian plane, some said it was a German plane. So then the next quadrangle we got to was the 21st. And there was about 4 or 5 that were hit. And soldiers, they have a habit when they leave the mess hall, they'll always make a sandwich when they go out. Well, this Sunday morning, they always had pancakes. This soldier, he had a pancake rolled up in his hand, the jelly sticking out of it. And they hadn't covered him up yet. Then I got back to Schofield. Joe Circleski sitting on an iron fence there, back in my barracks, and he said, "Here comes a civilian." where have you been? The old man is looking for you. And we sat down and talked, and we said, well, the war is going to last 10 years, or how we had it figured. But we never knew then. And this started out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I said, what time is it? Someone said, it's 2 o'clock. I said, I can't believe it. Your watch must be wrong. It can't be 2 o'clock. Well, that afternoon, the first sergeant came, and he said, okay, civilian, come on with me. I got a detail. Go down the motor pool and get a truck. So I got a truck and went to Wheeler Field, and they were picking up bodies in the mess hall, or Hickam Field, and they were picking up bodies, and they had coffins shaped like a mummy box, and they would put a head, an arm, a couple legs, whatnot, one dog tag, and then load it on the truck. At that time, there was only one cemetery involved, and that was at Schofield Barracks. So, took the first load out to the cemetery, and a big bulldozer dug a great big trench, and they stacked them 4 high, and that's where they are. I don't know if they ever took the bodies out of there after that or not. And then the few Japanese that they had that were shot down, they buried them on the outside of the fence. There was an iron fence going around the cemetery. They buried the sailors there. And then I went back to my outfit, and Top Sergeant, he said, okay, he says, I got another detail for you. He said, take your truck, he says, and get in line over there. You're going into Diamond Head, get ammunition. So we got ammunition. And no lights, just dark. And it was dark. No lights, nothing. You couldn't see one light at all. He says, no smoking, no light, no matches. And I made 2 trips that night. And then I got back to Schofield. I went to mess hall. And my first sergeant, he was in World War I. And when I went through the chow line, I got 1 prune, 1 egg, a half a piece of toast, and that was it. Because in World War I, he said he almost starved to death, and he was going to save on the food. Well, the food spoiled before he could meet his whatever you want to call it. But anyway, he was really a type. And after December and then January, 1st of February, my outfit moved out. We were Schofield Barracks was a Hawaiian division, and they broke it up and they made 2 divisions. They made the 24th and the 25th, and I was in the 25th division. And we went to Guadalcanal. I was in Guadalcanal for 2 years and 3 months, and then Villa La Vella in Monday, and then to the Philippines. And then the war was over. I hope I'll never have another one.
I'm James Lehman Forbes. I joined the Navy here at Louisville, January 1940. I went to basic training at Great Lakes, Illinois, and about the 20th of March or thereabouts, they assigned me to the battleship Arizona, which was in port at San Pedro, California. We went out on a special train. They had a lot of recruits going from Great Lakes, so they chartered a special train, taking these recruits out to join the fleet. They fed us this old line: if you'll hurry up and forfeit your basic training leave, you can get on the ship and go for a cruise. Well, we did. We went on a cruise. It was kind of an extended one before we got back from it. And being right fresh from the farm, I thought this was really a break. I could go aboard ship and I wouldn't have to milk any cows. But I had to scrub a lot of deck. And I had this, what they scrubbed the decks with was not just soap and water and brushes, but they used these half a brick. They called it Holy Stone. And it was some religion, let me tell you that. You roll up your britches and get out there in that water and sand. You'd scrub deck for about 2 hours. Then you go in for your breakfast, which would be beans and coffee. Well, I never drank coffee, but I got to where I would just about drink anything after hitting that cold water in the morning right out of your hammock. That was something else. I didn't realize when I joined the Navy I was going to have to sleep in the hammock. So I slept in the hammock up at Great Lakes, and I thought, well, boy, when I get aboard ship, I won't have to sleep in a hammock. But I went aboard ship, and I had to sleep in a hammock aboard ship. But later, they reworked the ship, and they put bunks on it. But that wasn't much problem anyway. You get where you would sleep anywhere. Sleep standing up. That Navy life kind of got in the swing of it. Of course, I was young and full of vinegar at the time. And we used to have a lot of fun aboard ship, in addition to a lot of work. We'd get paid. We were drawing $21 a month. And then after a few months, I don't know, 4 or 6 months, we went up to 36. Shucks, we had so much money we didn't know what to do with it. So I saved some of mine. And then later, the latter part of 1940, I got some leave, and I had enough money to take my 24 days leave or something like that. The ship was in the shipyard up at Bremerton, Washington at that time. Normally they keep the ships at that time at Pearl in the fleet out there for 6 months, and then they would come back to the States for 2 weeks, R&R. I don't know just what that R&R is for. Recreation and reaming or something like that, I think. But anyway, if the ship was stationed in the fleet out there, or if you were stationed out there, you could bring your family out. Some of those guys were married. Of course, I wasn't. We were due to go back to the States. We'd been out there for 6 months, well, since July. So we were expecting to go back to the States, and of course the Sunday morning of December the 7th, that changed that. I was in the duty section that morning aboard ship, and I had reached the dazzling heights of coxswain, which is now Petty Officer 3rd Class. And they had everyone in the duty section had certain duties to perform. And that Sunday morning, it was my job to set up the after part of the ship for the chaplain. We had a full captain chaplain. His name was Kirkpatrick. And he'd have church services on the stern of the ship. And I had a detail of about a half a dozen or so seamen. And we had carried the portable organ out, folding chairs, the portable pulpit. We'd set that up for his church services, and this was just before 8 o'clock. And in fact, the bugler and the color guard were back at the stern of the ship making preparations for morning colors. Well, during the week they'd have the band back there playing music. But on Sunday morning there, they had just a bugler. And at 5 minutes to 8, he would sound first call on the bugle. And this would give everybody warning that the colors were coming up and to make preparations for the morning colors. He had already sounded this first call. And this is done on signal. The Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet was over on, I believe, a battleship Pennsylvania or someplace. And they run that flag. It's up at the yard arm and on signal, and right on the time they run it down, and that's the signal for them to go ahead and conduct morning colors. That had already happened, and we had just completed our assignment there of setting up for the chaplain. We started back up the deck, and as we started up the deck, well, these planes started coming in. And they were coming right out of the early morning sun, right out of the east. And you can look up to see what or who they were or anything, and all you could see was the sunshine, and it would blind us. So I didn't pay much attention to them because we were so used to having planes flying around. And we were at that time expecting 2 of the aircraft carriers to come in that had been down in the Midway area. So we thought, well, maybe that's the Midway planes. And then they came on down, and they'd been playing these war games with the Army Air Corps. That was before the Air Force. And the planes would come out, and they would drop a flare and a sandbag somewhere in the vicinity of the ship off 50 yards to the side or 50 yards astern of the ship. And it'd have a carbide flare on it. That would mark the position that his bomb hit, so he'd know how well he was doing. So when these planes started coming in and dropping bombs, I thought, well, that's the Army Air Corps. There's the gung-ho. They don't want to even stop war games on Sunday. Here we are wanting to rest and relax. They want to play war games. But then one of the bombs hit the bow of the Arizona, and I thought, boy, somebody's going to catch hell now. They hit the ship. Because I still thought this was games. As soon as the planes started coming in, we had been trained to go to air defense. Well, for the men in the division where I was at, air defense meant to close all the watertight doors and hatches in our part of the ship, which we did. And then we were to fill in on the anti-aircraft battery. So we did this, and as we went up to the anti-aircraft battery, they were already fully manned and they were firing. They didn't need any men on the guns because they were fully manned. And one of our leading petty officers says it's the Japanese, says this is war, so we may as well get to our battle stations. So we did. We were assigned to the our battle station was in number 4 turret. So we went into number 4 turret. We had to go down inside, below decks, and then go aft from where we were, midships. There's so much shrapnel and so forth flying on top side that we would never have made it to the turret, I don't think, out on top side. We got down in the turret, and there was a bomb hit on top of the turret. That turret has got 14 inches of steel around it, so it ricocheted that bomb off. But about that time, all of the lights went out, and it smoked us up. There was a flash, a hot flash from that bomb, penetrated through that turret and scorched us. And that smoke in there was so thick that we couldn't breathe in there, so we went over from down below, we went over into number 3 turret handling room, and there was just a handful of us, maybe 15. We went over there, and the turret crew from number 3 turret was in the handling room of that turret, so we all stayed together. The turret officer was over there, and he told us, he said, come on up in the gun pits up here, and said, we'll stay up here, and as soon as it's safe, we'll go out on the top side. Well, down below us was the ammunition storages, and they had big rooms of gunpowder down there, the rooms maybe 12-foot square, and it had these 100-pound bags of powder in there. So we were afraid of that, and we just kept thinking, well, that's going to blow up, and it'll blow us to high heaven, you know. So we stayed, the last word that come over the public address system was fire on the quarterdeck. Well, this number 3 turret sits right on the quarterdeck area there. And there was no lights, no power, no PA system. So we knew that we were in a hot spot there. And it took the bloomers off the guns. These bloomers are around the guns to kind of shield them from the spray and what have you, the water, rain. So they had took them off, and the smoke was coming in around the guns into the turret. And so we decided that the best thing we could do was take off. We were wearing these white shorts, so we figured the best thing we could do was take off our undershirt and our shorts and just leave our skivvy drawers on and take the rest of them clothes and cram around them old guns there to keep the smoke out. And we did that. I had my shoes on, of course, and I always kept my shoes shined up, spit shine. Boy, they were really ready for inspection. And finally the turret officer, he said, well, since we can get out of here now, since the gunfire and the bombing has let up. So we climbed out of the turret, and it was up roughly 10 feet above the deck. And there was a ladder on the outside of the turret, the barbette. So we climbed down the ladder there and stepped onto the main deck of the ship. And we didn't realize, just how bad a shape it was in. But we stepped down into the water. It was about knee deep, and the water had the oil floating on top of it, and it was burning. And it was only 15 or 20 feet from where we climbed down out of there. But the wind coming out of the east was blowing that the fire, and of course the tide was helping it keep it away from us. Well, I had my shoes in one hand, went on back to the after part of the ship, the stern part, back by number 4 turret, and the deck was dry back there. So I set my shoes down up under the overhang of that turret. Just like I was going to go back and put them on sometime, and go up Market Street on Liberty. But that never happened. I don't know. The shoes are still there as far as I'm concerned. But we were still thinking that the magazines were going to explode, and they were right below us. We went back on the stern part of the ship, and most of the men come out of the turret. They went right over the side, and there's a boat picked up some of them, and the first lieutenant, who was a lieutenant commander, Fuqua, he was back on the after part of the ship, had his hands in his pockets, smoking a cigar and looking around, and he supposedly was directing the rescue operations. He got the Congressional Medal of Honor for it anyway. He was the senior surviving officer from the Arizona. There was a repair ship, the Vestal, was tied alongside of us. And they were trying to get underway. And they had their mooring lines over to the bits on our ship there. And Turkey Graham, he was a first-class aviation machinist mate. He was going to get the lines off, although it was too heavy for him, so he grabbed a fire axe and he started chopping the mooring line so it could get underway. And somebody hollered at him and said, "Hey," said, "don't cut our lines," said, "we might need them." He just kept swinging the axe and said, "Get the hell out of here while you can." And they did. They got underway. And we had one of the leading petty officers from the division I was in with us there. So he said, "Let's get a few of these life rafts over the side for these men to climb in." So we did get a few of the life rafts over the side, but they didn't have any paddles with them. So, but men in the water could climb up on them and get out of the water and the oil and the fire there, and then a boat would come along and pick them up and rescue them. So it did some good. But there was about half dozen of us left there, and of Barth, he said, we better get over here, off of here while we can, because he says those magazines could go any time. And I think we all were in accord with that, so we went over the side, and when I went over the side, I hit an old boat balloon that was floating in the water. And about this time, there was some more activity stirred up there, gunfire and shrapnel. It was flying around. That oil on top of the water was burning, and our aim was to swim over to Ford Island. Right directly from the Arizona, there was a little boat landing over there. It was the officers' landing, they called it. And the officers used to go over there and get off the boat when they were going over to Ford Island to play golf or something of that sort. And there wasn't a very big dock over there. So headed for it, this other friend of mine and myself, and we were swimming in that old thick oil, and I had got my nostrils full of it, and I about clogged up. So he kind of helped me along there till I got started, and I got over there, well, both of us did, and just as we got to the dock, there was a big 50-foot motor launch pulled right between the boat landing and where I was at. And then that thick oil, you couldn't see anything. Everything was just that old black oil. And when that boat pulled in there, and I was slick and greasy, and I couldn't climb up out of the water. That side of that boat was about 4 foot high or so. So I was hollering for someone to help me into the boat. And there was Jim Zadok. Looked over the side of the boat, and he saw me in. How he did it, I don't know, but he recognized me. He said, "Somebody help me get Forbes out of the water here." And nobody jumped, you know, like he warned them to, so he gave them a little hard, harsh words there. "Come and help me get Forbes out here." So they got a hold of me, and my arms was greasy, and so they couldn't hold on to me. So they finally pulled me out. And when I got up in the boat, I was all greasy, really black greasy. So I had on this old pair of shorts, and I saw another pair of shorts laying there in the boat, under drawers. And I thought, well, they're dry anyway, so I just dropped the ones I had and put them on. But when I got them on, there was only one leg and a waistband to them. Somebody had used the rest of that for shining brass work, you know. So I walked into the off of the dock, and this was the officers, bachelor officers' quarters there, where we were at. And the women from Ford Island were living there and had come there for shelter during this attack. So I started in there, and I didn't have much clothes on, so I backed up. And one of those ladies grabbed me and says, "Come on," says, "this is no time to be mud." It says, "I've seen men with no clothes on before." So they took me in, and along with some of the others there, and they tried to scrub the oil off the best they could. They didn't have any water or soap. They just had some clothing and towels and so forth, and they scrubbed me down with that and put me on some of those clothes that had some sport clothes there that belonged to these officers that lived in the quarters. And in 5 minutes, they would be soaked with that old grease and oil. So they'd take them off and put some more on. And they run out of clothing, so then they went into the uniforms. And they found a captain's full dress uniform with tails, and it had wings on it. And they put that on me. Well, that was kind of a heavy material, so the grease and oil didn't come through that. So I held on to that. I wore that all day. And I got a lot of respect then, you know, being a captain. I didn't have no hat or no shoes, but I was captain for a day. They took us over to the Block Arena, which is the recreation center in Pearl Harbor. And we stayed over there for a couple of days, and they assigned me to the USS Craven. And so on the third day, I went out on the creek. There was 3 of us from the Arizona that went on that creek. I stayed in the Navy, and during the war there, I made Chief Petty Officer. I stayed in for a career. I stayed in 22 years. I retired as Chief Boatswain's Mate.
Remembrance presented by the Ladies Auxiliary of Robert E. Newman, Post 3636, Veterans of Foreign War. I'm Virginia Hodges, the Papa Chairman. 4 years ago, we started our search for Pearl Harbor survivors. Those were the men that were actually on Pearl Harbor the day of December the 7th, 1941. Can you remember where you were on that day? Many of us can. I was at the Lowe's Theater. That's now the closed house that's on 4th Street. And we were watching a movie. They turned down the lights. They turned up the lights. And told everyone that was employed by the Courier Journal and Louisville Times to get to their stations, that they had an extra coming in. Well, being a kid as it was at 13 years, I didn't realize how important an extra was. So my brother and I, we stayed to see the end of the movie. When we came out, the people were very excited on the street. They were crying. They were hollering, extra, extra. Pearl Harbor was attacked. There was confusion. Oh, shoot, I lost it. Start over again.
Where to start over?
Good evening, friends. Welcome to the Pearl Harbor Remembrance, presented by the Ladies Auxiliary of Robert E. Newman, Post 3636, Veterans of Foreign War. 4 years ago, we started our search for veterans that were at Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941. That's 47 years ago. Can you remember where you were? Many of us can. I was 13 years old and enjoying a Sunday afternoon at the Lowe's Theater, now the closed house on 4th Street. They stopped the movie, turned up the lights, and requested all employees of the Courier Journal and the Louisville Times to please report to their stations at once that an extra was being issued. There was some confusion and a lot of people left, but my brother and I, as kids, not really realizing what an extra was, stayed to the end of the movie. When we came out, there was a lot of confusion. And people, the big boys were yelling, extra, extra, Pearl Harbor attacked. People were rushing about and crying, and I had no idea what Pearl Harbor was. But from the panic reaction of the people, I knew it was affecting our whole country. Ask any citizen over 60, where were they on December the 7th, 1941, and you will get a story. It gives me great pleasure and pride to turn this program over to Mr. James Edwards and members of the Kentucky Bluegrass Chapter Number 1.
Thank you, Mrs. Hodges, and on behalf of the Kentucky Bluegrass Chapter Number 1 Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, I would also like to thank the Robert E. Newman VFW Post Ladies Auxiliary for inviting us to remember Pearl Harbor. I joined the Navy January 1941. 17 years old, went to boot camp at Great Lakes. Reported aboard the USS New Orleans, which was a heavy cruiser at Pearl Harbor in May of 1941. We operated in the Pacific on fleet maneuvers, and on December 7, 1941, we were tied up in the Navy Yard at Pier 16, Portside 2. We were getting all of our power from the dock, and since this was a Sunday morning, we had a holiday routine and we got to sleep in. At 7:55 on December 7th, I was standing on the well deck in the chow line waiting go down in the mess hall and eat breakfast. We noticed these planes over Hickam Field. They were diving on the field, and the first plane dove, but evidently they didn't hit anything when they released their bombs. But the second plane that came down, they hit a hangar and they blew it to pieces. At just about this time, they sounded general alarm, and the bosun mate of the watch piped all hands to battle station. And I can remember him hearing him saying, "The dirty SOBs are bombing us." I went to my battle station, which was on a 5-inch anti-aircraft battery, a gun 8. I was hot shellman on that gun. The duties of a hot shellman is to catch the hot shells after the gun is fired and throw them clear of the gun. We had an awning spread over the guns for shade. The first thing we had to do was to clear these awnings away. While we were clearing the awnings away, the torpedo planes came down behind the docks, and every ship that was tied up in the Navy Yard, they were strafing the ship as they went by. We got the awning cleared away, and the master at arms come up on the gun deck with his sidearms, which was a 45, and blew the locks off our ready boxes. We soon used all the ammunition that was in our ready boxes, and since we had no power, well, we were getting power from the dock, and somebody thought we could get underway, so they decided to cut us loose from the dock, and that cut all of our power from the dock. And since we had no power, we had to form an ammunition line. So everyone that wasn't connected with the gun crew was assembled and put into this ammunition line to pass ammunition by hand from the magazines to the guns. Our chaplain, Lieutenant Alan Forgy, went up and down this line slapping these guys on the back, saying, "Praise the Lord," and pass the ammunition. Later on, this became a song, and Chaplain Forgy wrote a book about the ship, and that was the title, "Praise the Lord and Pass the Ammunition." The time went by swiftly, and our gun crews and loading crews were getting wore out loading those 80-pound shells by hand. The San Francisco was tied up alongside the dock across from us, and they were our sister ship. So their 5-inch gun crews came aboard to New Orleans to help us with this hand loading, which we really needed and greatly appreciated. The time went by soon, and the attack was over, and we spent the night loading ammunition onto the ship, and they brought yard workmen aboard and sent them to the engine rooms, and immediately started putting our turbines back together. This was the start of a wartime cruise that would just about equal any ship in the Navy. And there were 17 battle stars allotted during the war, and the New Orleans got 16 of them. I was discharged from the Navy in 1947, and I went to work for a local gas and electric company, where I worked for 38 years and 7 months, retired September 1st, 1985.
Been married.
As of December 9th, my wife Dottie and I will have been married 44 years. We have 4 children and 3 grandchildren, of which we are very proud.
And then what? Is it fading?
Shut the button off.
Which button?
This button.
Oh, that.
Push your button. Thank you, Mrs. Hodges, and on behalf of the Kentucky Bluegrass Chapter #1 of Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, I would like to also thank Robert E. Newman, Post Ladies Auxiliary, for letting us remember Pearl Harbor. I joined the Navy in January 1941 and was 17 years old. I went to boot camp at Great Lakes, and in May of 1941 reported aboard the USS New Orleans at Pearl Harbor. The USS New Orleans was a heavy cruiser. We operated through the summer out with fleet at out of Pearl Harbor that summer. And on December 7th, 1941, found us in the Navy Yard, tied up Portside 2, Pier 16. This was a Sunday morning, and since we had holiday routine on Sunday morning, we got to sleep in. So when the attack started, I was on the well deck in the chow line waiting to go down to the mess hall to eat breakfast. We noticed these planes flying over Hickam Field. One plane dove on the field and they dropped something, and evidently it didn't hit anything, but the second plane dropped a bomb and it hit a hangar and blew the hangar completely to pieces. At about this time they sounded the general alarm on our ship, and the boatswain made the watch. He piped all hands to battle station, saying the dirty SOBs are bombing us. Our battle station was on a 5-inch anti-aircraft gun, which I was the hot shellman. The hot shellman's job was to catch the hot shell cases after the gun fired to throw them clear of the gun. We had awnings spread over these guns for shade, and the first thing we had to do was to clear these awnings away. While clearing these awnings away, we noticed the torpedo planes coming down behind the Navy Yard docks, and they were strafing every ship in the Navy Yard, heading for the battleship. We got our gun firing, and somebody thought we might be able to get underway, so they cut us loose from the dock. And this cut all of our power because we were getting all of our power from the dock in the Navy Yard. This left us without power, and these guns, we used air pressure to ram these shells with these guns. And since we didn't have any air pressure, we had to ram the shells by hand. And these shells weighed 80 pounds apiece. Our ready boxes was locked up, and the master at arms came up the gun deck, blowing the locks off of all the ready boxes. We got to this ammunition, but we soon expanded to ammunition that was in the ready boxes. They formed a line of people that weren't assigned to guns, and they passed ammunition from the magazine up to the guns by hand. Our chaplain, Lieutenant Hal M. Forgy, walked up and down this line, slapping these men on the back shot and praised the Lord and passed the ammunition. Later on in the war, there was a song written about this, and Chaplain Forgy wrote a book about praise the Lord and pass the ammunition about the USS New Orleans. The time went by pretty fast, and our gun crews and loaders were getting completely wore out. And men from San Francisco, which was undergoing a complete overhaul across the dock from us, came aboard to New Orleans to help our gun crews out. Since their guns were all off and they were undergoing complete overhaul. This help was greatly appreciated. Our boats were dispatched to the battleships to pick up survivors, and all while they were over there, they were under strafing attack by the Japanese. When the attack was over, we stayed at battle station until approximately 3 o'clock that afternoon. And that night, we went back to battle station when some planes came in off the Enterprise. Unfortunately, these planes either didn't give the recognition signal or they gave the wrong recognition signal, and we shot down 3 of the Enterprise's planes. By this time, the firepower, there was really a concentrated firepower over the harbor, and these planes didn't have a chance. The rest of the night, we carried ammunition, brought yard workmen aboard. They sent them in the engine rooms, and they put them to work reassembling our turbines. I stayed on in New Orleans until 1944 when I got off at Guam. During the war, New Orleans there were 17 battle stars given for major battles in the Pacific. There were 2 ships got 17 battle stars, the Enterprise, USS Enterprise, and the USS San Francisco. USS New Orleans got 16 of the 17 battle stars. I was discharged from the Navy in 1947, went to work here in Louisville for Louisville Gas and Electric Company, where I worked for 38 years and 7 months. Retired September 1st, 1985. As of December 9th, my wife Dottie and I will have been married 44 years. We have 4 children and 3 grandchildren, of which we are very proud.
Good evening, friends. Welcome to the 4th Annual Observance of Remembrance of Pearl Harbor, presented by the Ladies Auxiliary of Robert E. Newman Post 3636 of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'm Virginia Hodges. I'm the 1988 Poppy Chairman. Ask anyone over 60 where they were on December the 7th, 1941, and most of them can tell you exactly where they were and what they were doing. It gives me great pride to introduce some gentlemen here tonight from the Kentucky Bluegrass Chapter 1 of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. They remember December the 7th, 1941 well. They were at Pearl Harbor. Jim? Good evening, friends. Welcome to the 4th Observance of Remembrance of Pearl Harbor, presented by the Ladies Auxiliary of Robert E. Newman Post 3636 of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'm Virginia Hodges. I'm the 1988 Poppy Chairman. Ask anyone over 60 where they were on December the 7th, 1941, and they probably will remember exactly where they were and what they were doing. Tonight we have with us Jim Edwards and some other members of the Kentucky Bluegrass Association.
Do it over.
Good evening, friends. Welcome to our 4th Remembrance of Pearl Harbor, presented by the Ladies Auxiliary of the Robert E. Newman Post 3636, Veterans of Foreign Wars. I'm Virginia Hodges. I'm the 1988 Poppy Chairman. Ask anyone over 60 where they were on December the 7th, 1941, and they could probably tell you exactly where they were and exactly what they were doing. Tonight gives me great pride to introduce Jim Edwards and other members of the Kentucky Bluegrass Chapter Number 1 of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. They remember December the 7th, 1941 well. They were at Pearl Harbor. Jim?
I think that's a good one.